If you testify, you'll regret it. My cousin said that after I agreed to help the police investigate his tax fraud. My parents begged me to stay quiet for the family name. I refused. On the day of the trial, I walked into the courtroom, and the look on my aunt's face when she saw who was with me? Priceless. So I've been lurking on this sub for ages, but never thought I'd have my own story to share. Until now, buckled TF up, because this is going to be a wild ride. For context, I, 34M, come from what you might call a family business situation. Not going to give too many details because my cousin Pedro might be a total piece of garbage, but I'm not trying to dox anyone. Let's just say we deal with distribution of certain products, and there's decent money involved. My uncle started it in the 90s, brought in my dad, Calvin, and eventually most of the extended family got involved one way or another. Growing up, Pedro and I were actually tight. Same age, went to the same schools, hung out on weekends. He was always the cool one, had the newest gadgets, knew how to talk to girls, that whole thing. Meanwhile, I was grinding away at my computer, learning everything I could about finance and technology. Who's laughing now, huh? Things started getting weird about 8 months ago. Family dinners got tense. Pedro started showing up in a Tesla he definitely couldn't afford on what the business was paying him. My Aunt Milana kept dropping hints about their investment genius son. Whatever. I didn't really care until I noticed some discrepancies in our quarterly numbers. See, what they didn't know is that I'd been quietly handling most of the financial tracking systems for years. Dad trusted me with the back-end stuff because nobody else had the patience for it. So when I noticed funds being siphoned through 3 different shell accounts, red fucking flags everywhere. I spent 2 weeks digging through spreadsheets at night, linking transactions, following the money. And guess where it all led back to? Pedro's grimy hands. This absolute waste of DNA had been skimming from the family for years. Not just pocket change either. We're talking serious cash that could have put his younger cousins through college. I still remember staring at my screen at 3 a.m., physically shaking with rage. The betrayal wasn't just against the business. It was against all of us who trusted him. Who the hell does that to their own family? I compiled everything into a report. Graphs, transaction histories, proof that was absolutely undeniable. Then I did something I'm still not sure was smart. I confronted him directly. No backup, no witnesses, just me, him, and a folder full of receipts. We met at this dive bar where we used to hang out in college. The moment he saw my face, he knew something was up. I didn't even need to say anything, just slid the folder across the table. The way his expression changed as he flipped through those pages? Priceless. First confusion, then shock, then this cold calculation that I'd never seen on him before. He tried to play it cool at first, said there must be some mistake in my numbers. When that didn't work, he moved to phase 2, justification. He deserved more than what the family was giving him. He had put in the hours. He was just taking what should have been his anyway. Then came the part that sealed his fate. He leaned across the table, got right in my face, and told me that if I testified or showed anyone those documents, I would regret it. That's exactly what he said. Not please don't tell, not let's work this out. A straight-up threat from the cousin I grew up with. I didn't say a word, just grabbed my folder and walked out. But inside, nuclear meltdown. Nobody, and I mean nobody, threatens me and walks away clean. Before I could take the evidence to our accountant or maybe even the authorities, my phone blew up with texts from my parents. Somehow Pedro had beaten me to the punch and spun some BS story about me falsely accusing him because I was jealous or whatever. The family group chat was in chaos. My mom Susan and dad called me in for this emergency family meeting, which was basically them begging me to drop the whole thing. Mom kept going on about the family name and how this would destroy Milana if it got out. Dad was more practical, worried about the business imploding if clients found out there had been financial irregularities. I sat there listening to them basically ask me to eat this enormous shit sandwich to protect Pedro. My own parents, choosing peace over justice, choosing him over me. That night was when the plan started forming. If the family wanted to play it this way, fine. But I wasn't going to just roll over. Pedro thought he was smart. I was about to show him what real strategic thinking looked like. First, I backed up every piece of evidence to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I started making calls, not to family, but to people Pedro had screwed over outside the business. Turns out I wasn't the only one with a grudge. His ex-girlfriend Harper had some very interesting stories about money he'd borrowed and never returned. And Axel, his former roommate? Let's just say Pedro had made enemies in places he'd completely forgotten about. I spent the next few weeks gathering intel, building my case stronger, and watching Pedro get more and more comfortable thinking he'd won. He even had the balls to smirk at me during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. If only he knew what was coming. The more I dug, the worse it got. Pedro hadn't just been stealing from the business. He'd been manipulating accounts to make other family members look bad. My cousin Arlene almost lost her position because of numbers he'd tampered with. He'd been playing us all against each other while filling his pockets. My parents kept trying to check in on me, making sure I was being reasonable. Each time, I nodded and smiled and died a little, inside knowing they'd chosen family peace over actual justice. But their betrayal only fueled my determination. 3 weeks in, I had a plan so perfect, it gave me actual goosebumps thinking about it. Pedro had no idea who he was messing with. While he was busy flaunting his stolen cash on Instagram and TikTok, I was setting up the dominoes that would completely obliterate his life. The family had scheduled this big meeting to clear the air and move forward together. They thought we were coming to sing Kumbaya and pretend nothing happened. But that meeting wasn't going to go how any of them expected. I've spent my entire adult life being the quiet one, the reasonable one, the one who fixed problems instead of causing them. But something inside me snapped when Pedro threatened me, when my parents sided with him, when the truth became less important than keeping up appearances. Some people might talk about forgiveness or taking the high road. Nah, not happening. Pedro crossed a line, and now he was going to learn exactly why that was the biggest mistake of his pathetic life. They think I'm just going to roll over. That I'll what? Forgive and forget? The old Victor might have. But that guy's gone. The new me? I'm out for blood. As I finalize my preparations for this family meeting, one thing is crystal clear. Pedro picked the wrong cousin to threaten. He has absolutely no idea what's coming for him. Revenge isn't a dish best served cold. It's best served brutal. Update 1. Thanks for all the awards and support. For those just joining this dumpster fire, check my profile for Part 1, where my cousin Pedro threatened me after I caught him stealing from our family business. So where was I? Right, Pedro had threatened me. My parents were choosing family peace over justice, and I was done playing nice. The day after that BS family dinner, I woke up to a text from Pedro acting like nothing happened. Just some meme about crypto with thinking of investing some of the bonus LOL. The audacity of this clown thinking he was untouchable. That text became my phone background, daily motivation for what I was about to do. First rule of war, know your enemy. Pedro's main weaknesses, his ego, his new lifestyle, and his desperate need for approval from his mom, my Aunt Milana. I started documenting everything about his habits and routines. When he posted on Instagram, who he hung out with, where he spent money. Dude was predictable as hell once I started paying attention. My master plan had 3 phases: gather allies and evidence, strategic isolation, total annihilation. For phase 1, I started with Harper, Pedro's ex from 2 years ago. Found her on Facebook and suggested meeting for coffee to catch up. Turns out Pedro had borrowed $12,000 from her for a business opportunity right before ghosting her. She still had all the Venmo receipts, texts, everything. The look on her face when I explained what he'd been doing with the family money. If looks could kill, Pedro would have spontaneously combusted across town. Next was Axel, Pedro's old roommate, who'd mysteriously moved out mid-lease last year, got his number from a mutual friend, and met him at a bar. Few beers in, he opened up about how Pedro had been stealing his stuff and selling it online, then gaslighting him about it. The final straw was when his grandfather's watch disappeared. Axel had photos of Pedro wearing it in a Snapchat story months later. The rage in this dude's eyes made my blood boil. But the real gold mine? Arlene from accounting. She'd been on the verge of getting fired last year because numbers weren't adding up in her department. Turns out Pedro had been manipulating data to make her look incompetent while covering his tracks. When I showed her my evidence over lunch, she literally started shaking. Not from fear, from fury. She'd been doubting herself for months, even started taking anxiety meds. Pedro had messed with her career and her mental health. My little revenge squad was forming nicely. Each person Pedro had stepped on was another piece on my chessboard. Meanwhile, the psychological warfare began. Phase 2 was all about making Pedro sweat without him knowing who was behind it. First, I anonymously reported his Tesla to the leasing company for payment discrepancies. Nothing major enough to cause real trouble, just enough to make them audit his account and send some scary-looking letters. His Instagram stories about dealing with bureaucratic BS were chef's kiss. Then I set up a script to make random small deposits and withdrawals from the shell accounts he was using, just enough to mess with his record-keeping and make him paranoid someone was onto him. The beauty of working in IT security for years is knowing exactly how to cover your digital tracks. The cherry on top? I started dropping subtle hints during family gatherings that outside auditors might be looking at the business soon. Never directly at him, just casual comments about regulatory changes and industry standards within earshot. Watching him try to maintain his cool while sweating through his designer shirt? Priceless. My parents kept trying to check in on me during this time. Dad would call with thinly veiled questions about whether I was still upset about that misunderstanding with Pedro. Mom sent those passive-aggressive texts like, "Family dinner Sunday. Hope everyone can be civil," with the praying hands emoji. I'd respond with thumbs up and keep plotting. The hardest part was playing normal at family functions. Pedro would strut around, flashing his Apple Watch and dropping comments about his investment portfolio, while I sat there knowing I was 10 steps ahead of his dumb ass. Every fake laugh and bro hug made my skin crawl, but seeing his subtle nervousness whenever business finances came up made it worth it. By week 3, Pedro was showing signs of cracking. His Instagram posts got less frequent. He started canceling on family events last minute. My Aunt Milana mentioned he seemed stressed about work and was having trouble sleeping. Good. Let him suffer. But I wasn't just playing mind games. The financial noose was tightening too. With Arlene's help, I created a complete record of every cent Pedro had stolen, where it went, and how he'd covered his tracks. The total made me physically sick. Over $70,000 gone over the past 3 years. I also discovered something that made my blood boil even hotter. Pedro hadn't just been stealing from the business. He'd been borrowing from my uncle's personal accounts too. The man who was basically a second father to us growing up. The same uncle who paid for Pedro's college and first apartment. The betrayal was beyond comprehension. Around this time, Pedro made his first real mistake. Getting nervous about the weird account activity, he tried to move a large chunk of money to a new account. But in his panic, he got sloppy with the paperwork. Arlene caught it immediately and documented everything without alerting him. Another piece of evidence for my growing file. Week 4 brought the opportunity I'd been waiting for. The annual family business meeting was scheduled at my parents' house, the one time each year when everyone would be present, including extended family who had smaller stakes in the business. My aunt and uncle, cousins, everyone. Perfect timing for the grand finale. 3 days before the meeting, Pedro tried to get ahead of things. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, all fake smiles, and bringing pizza like we were still bros. Started talking about how we should clear the air and move past disagreements. Then came the thinly veiled threats, wrapped in concern about how making accusations without solid proof could really hurt someone's reputation. I just nodded and played dumb while my blood boiled. Let him think he'd intimidated me. Let him walk away thinking he'd won. It just made what was coming next even sweeter. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. Not from nervousness, from pure electric anticipation. I'd prepared 3 copies of a comprehensive dossier on Pedro's activities. One for my uncle, one for my parents, and one extra special copy for my Aunt Milana. Each had slightly different evidence highlighted based on what would hit them hardest. I'd also prepared a digital presentation with Arlene's help. Every transaction, every discrepancy, every lie laid out in crystal-clear graphics that even the tech-challenged older members of the family could understand. Harper and Axel had both written statements about Pedro's pattern of financial exploitation that corroborated everything. Most importantly, I'd convinced all 3 of them, Harper, Axel, and Arlene, to attend the meeting as my surprise guests. They'd wait in my car until I texted them to come in. The ultimate power move. My phone buzzed at midnight with a text from Pedro, asking if we were cool for tomorrow and saying he hoped I'd been thinking about what we discussed. I didn't respond. Let him stew in uncertainty all night. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. Not because I was taking the high road or being the bigger person. F***CK, that noise. Peace because I knew that in less than 24 hours, the cousin who threatened me, the family who doubted me, and especially the aunt who raised such a snake would face a reckoning they'd never forget. Some might call what I was doing excessive, ruthless even. But when someone threatens you and your own parents take their side, there's no such thing as excessive. There's only justice, served exactly as deserved. Morning came, and with it a strange calm. I dressed carefully, nothing flashy, just my normal jeans and button-up. Loaded my presentation onto a USB drive, triple-checked my documents, and texted my revenge squad to confirm our timing. As I drove to my parents' house, watching the familiar streets of our neighborhood pass by, one thought kept repeating in my mind. In a few hours, Pedro's life, as he knew it, would be completely, utterly destroyed. And I wouldn't just witness it. I would be the one striking the match. The best part? He'd never see it coming. Not until it was far, far too late. Revenge isn't a dish best served cold. It's best served brutal. Update 2. Sorry for the wait. Had to deal with some family fallout, shocker, before posting this. Strap in because the day of reckoning finally arrived, and it was even better than I'd planned. The morning of the family meeting, I woke up at 5 a.m. without an alarm. Adrenaline had me wired. I triple-checked my evidence folders, made sure my presentation loaded correctly, and confirmed with my revenge squad that everyone was still on board. Arlene texted that she'd barely slept. Harper sent a selfie with her middle finger up, and the caption, "Ready to end this MF." Axel just sent back a thumbs up. Man of few words. But his hatred for Pedro was all the commitment I needed. I arrived at my parents' house 30 minutes early, partly to set up my laptop, but mostly to watch Pedro's face when he walked in and saw me already there, calm and prepared. My mom, Susan, was in the kitchen stress baking like she always does before family gatherings. The smell of cinnamon rolls couldn't even cut through the tension. She gave me this worried look, asking if I was planning to behave today. I just smiled and told her I'd be on my absolute best behavior. Technically, not a lie. My dad, Calvin, was arranging chairs in the dining room, avoiding eye contact. He'd been walking on eggshells around me for weeks. Asked if I needed help with my laptop setup, clearly trying to scope out what I was planning. I told him it was just some visual aids for the financial discussion. Again, not technically a lie. Family members started arriving one by one. Cousins, aunts, uncles, some I only see at these annual meetings. Everyone doing that fake nice small talk, grabbing coffee, complaining about traffic. nobody mentioning the elephant in the room, that Pedro and I had been at odds, and the whole family knew it. Then he walked in. Pedro strolled through the door 45 minutes late, classic power move, with my Aunt Milana right behind him. He was wearing designer sunglasses inside the house, like the douche he is, carrying a fancy coffee that probably cost $12. Milana was fussing over him as usual, asking if he wanted something to eat, making sure he had a good seat for the meeting. The moment Pedro spotted me by the laptop, he froze for half a second, just long enough for me to know he was thrown off his game. But he recovered quickly, flashing that fake smile and doing the bro nod in my direction. I smiled back, which clearly made him nervous. Pedro wasn't used to me looking happy to see him since our confrontation. My Aunt Milana barely acknowledged me, just a quick hello before continuing to orbit around Pedro. The family golden child could do no wrong in her eyes. That was about to change in spectacular fashion. As everyone settled in, my uncle started the meeting with the usual business updates, sales figures, market trends, blah blah blah. I half-listened while watching Pedro on the other side of the table, texting under the table and looking bored. His confidence made my blood boil. This smug asshole really thought he was untouchable. When my uncle opened the floor for other business matters, I raised my hand immediately. Pedro's head snapped up, suddenly alert. My parents exchanged nervous glances. This was it. I stood up and calmly explained that I had discovered some concerning financial discrepancies that everyone needed to be aware of. As I connected my laptop to the TV, Pedro interrupted, trying to suggest we table detailed financial discussions until after lunch. Classic deflection. My uncle, looking confused, asked what kind of discrepancies we were talking about. That's when I dropped the first bomb. Not accusations, cold, hard numbers. Specific amounts missing from specific accounts on specific dates. Times when money moved between accounts that didn't make sense for our business operations. I pulled up a simple chart showing exactly how much had disappeared over 3 years. $73,412 in total. The room went dead silent. Then came the murmurs. My uncle's face turned red as he started doing mental math. My Aunt Milana immediately jumped to Pedro's defense, suggesting there must be some accounting error or misunderstanding. Pedro forced a laugh, saying I was probably confused about how the business handled certain transactions. That's when I played my trump card. I casually mentioned that our accountant might be able to clear things up, and texted Arlene to come in. The look on Pedro's face when she walked through the door, fucking priceless. He literally dropped his phone on the table. Arlene didn't waste time with pleasantries. She launched straight into a breakdown of exactly how the money had been diverted, which accounts it had passed through, and how the trail led directly to Pedro's personal expenses. His Tesla payments, his Rolex, the down payment on his condo. She had receipts for everything. Pedro tried to interrupt, his voice getting higher with each attempt. But Arlene was on fire, pulling up document after document on my laptop. She explained how she'd almost lost her job because Pedro had manipulated records to hide his tracks and make her look incompetent. As Pedro's excuses got more desperate, I texted Harper and Axel. Their timing was perfect. They walked in just as Pedro was trying to paint himself as the victim of some misunderstanding. The absolute color drain from his face when he saw Harper. Priceless doesn't even begin to describe it. Harper stepped forward and calmly explained to the entire family how Pedro had borrowed $12,000 from her for a business opportunity right before ghosting her. She pulled out her phone and showed my aunt and uncle the Venmo history, the text messages, everything. Axel didn't even need to say much. He just placed his grandfather's watch on the table, the one Pedro had stolen and then worn in social media posts. My uncle recognized it immediately, having heard the story from Axel's family months ago. The beautiful thing? I barely had to speak. I just stood back and watched as 3 people Pedro had screwed over laid out the mountain of evidence I'd helped them compile, the perfect storm of witnesses he never saw coming. My Aunt Milana's face during all this was the moment I'd been waiting for. At first, defensive anger, then confusion, then this dawning horror as the evidence became impossible to deny. When she realized her precious son had stolen from his own family, she made this sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. She looked broken, and I felt nothing but satisfaction. Pedro's cool facade completely shattered. He started sweating, his designer shirt showing dark patches under the arms. His excuses got more frantic and contradictory, first claiming it was all a misunderstanding, then suggesting he'd been planning to pay everything back, then trying to flip it around and accuse me of having some vendetta against him. When he realized no one was buying it, he went for his last resort, intimidation, looked me dead in the eyes and reminded everyone about how accusations can damage reputations and how families should protect each other. The same threat tactic he'd tried on me before, now attempted in front of everyone. That's when my dad finally found his spine. He stood up, looked at Pedro, and told him to stop. Just that one word, stop, but in a tone I'd never heard from my father before. The room went silent again. My uncle, who'd been unusually quiet during the revelations, finally spoke up. He asked Pedro one simple question. Was any of this untrue? Pedro started another rambling explanation, but my uncle cut him off, repeating the question. Was any of this untrue? Pedro's silence was his final confession. What followed was the most uncomfortable 30 minutes of family discussion I've ever witnessed. My uncle laid out immediate consequences. Pedro was cut off from all business accounts effective immediately. He would need to repay every cent he'd taken, plus interest. His stake in the family business would be sold to cover his debts if necessary. But the financial punishment wasn't even the best part. It was watching Pedro's social standing in the family completely implode in real time. The cousins who used to hang on his every word wouldn't even look at him. My Aunt Milana, who had defended him through everything, sat there with tears streaming down her face, unable to come up with any more excuses. My parents, who had begged me to stay quiet for the family name, now couldn't look me in the eye. My mom kept trying to catch my attention, probably wanting to apologize, but I deliberately avoided her gaze. That conversation could wait. The meeting ended with Pedro storming out, slamming the door like a child having a tantrum. My aunt followed him, still trying to damage control even after everything. Some habits die hard, I guess. As people gathered their things to leave, the mood was a mix of shock, anger, and this weird relief. Like a family sickness had finally been diagnosed. My uncle pulled me aside, gripping my shoulder with a shaky hand, thanking me for having the courage to bring this to light. One by one, family members came up to me, Arlene, Harper, and Axel. Some apologized for not seeing what was happening. Others thanked us for the truth. A few were still processing, not saying much at all. My revenge squad and I left together, heading to a bar to celebrate. The weight that lifted off my shoulders that day was indescribable. Not because I took the high road, fuck that noise, but because I'd delivered exactly the justice that Pedro deserved. Update epilogue, 6 months later. Pedro's life imploded spectacularly after that day. Had to sell his Tesla and move out of his fancy condo. He's living in some crappy studio apartment now, according to my cousin's Snapchat. His Instagram, that used to be full of luxury watches and vacation pics, completely deleted. Couldn't keep up the facade anymore. He tried to get a job at one of our competitors, but somehow they all seemed to know about his history of financial misconduct. Weird how word gets around in our industry. Wink. My Aunt Milana still occasionally tries to repair things between us, suggesting family therapy or mediation. Hard pass. Some bridges deserve to stay burned. My parents eventually apologized for not believing me. Too little, too late in my book, but we're slowly rebuilding some trust. They know better than to ever ask me to keep quiet about anything again. The family business is doing better than ever without Pedro's drain on the finances. Arlene got promoted and now oversees all the accounting with full authority. Harper used the money Pedro finally repaid her to start her own small business. Axel wears his grandfather's watch every day. And me? I sleep like a fucking baby, knowing that when someone threatened me and my own parents took their side, I didn't just roll over and take it. I methodically, systematically destroyed them. Some of you asked in the comments if I feel bad about how things went down, if I regret going nuclear instead of handling it privately. The answer is, hell no. Pedro made his choices. He stole from family. He threatened me. He deserved everything he got and more. For anyone dealing with the toxic family members who think they're untouchable, sometimes the only language they understand is consequences. Don't let family loyalty become a weapon used against you.